Presentation of Science Trek on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Birds of prey are raptors, which means they're great hunters. Find out more about these unique birds. Stay tuned. Science Trek is next. Hi, I'm Joan Cartan Hansen, and welcome to Science Trek, and welcome to the World Center for Birds of Prey. We're here to answer your questions, but before we do, let's learn a little bit more about birds of prey. In the world of birds, raptors, or birds of prey, are king. Birds of prey are eagles and owls. They're osprey and falcons, and many others. As a group, they're called raptors. You can identify raptors in several ways. They have a sharp, curved beak. They fly at amazing speed. And raptors kill with their feet. Raptors have sharp, curved talons or claws on their feet. They can capture and hold prey. They can snatch a fish right out of water or strike a bird in the air. Their special beak and talons work kind of like a knife and fork, spearing and tearing food.
What do they eat?
Different raptors eat different things. Some eat insects. Others eat small mammals like chipmunks or rabbits, or sometimes fish. Birds of prey can fly very fast and almost silently. A peregrine falcon can dive at over 200 miles an hour. Birds of prey have keen hearing. A great gray owl can hear a vole running 60 feet away, even if the vole is under 18 inches of snow. And birds of prey have extremely good eyesight. A falcon can see a grasshopper 300 feet away. That's 3 to 8 times better than humans see.
Hey, if I could do that, I could see my lunch way down there.
Raptors soar on air currents and then swoop down in search of food.
Where do birds of prey live?
You can find birds of prey anywhere in the world except Antarctica. One of the best places to find raptors is at the Morley Nelson Snake River Birds of Prey National Conservation Area near Boise. The canyon walls here are perfect for raptors' nests. But raptors can live anywhere there is a food supply, even in big cities. Raptors can't survive, though, when their habitat is destroyed by fire or by humans, or if its food supply disappears or is contaminated by chemicals in the environment. Scientists around the world are working to save those birds of prey that are threatened with extinction. You know, humans have always had a special relationship with birds of prey. Jim Wilmark is a licensed falconer at the World Center for Birds of Prey.
Falconry is the hunting of wild quarry with trained raptors. This is a kestrel, and he is the smallest falcon in North America. Not necessarily him himself, but the species. This equipment on him, these anklets, and these are jesses, one on each leg, and these come down and they're attached to a swivel, and that goes on a leash. And this is, over the thousands of years, people have found that this is the best way to keep falcons unless they're free-lofted. So this that I'm going to swing is a lure. And this one looks a little like a blackbird, but it could look like anything. And falcons are trained to allure because often they're so far away from you that they can't hear you, but they can always see you swinging a lure. So if I swing this and drop it on the ground, you should come over and get it. There he goes. If you really want to be a falconer and fly a bird, you better plan on spending a large part of your life doing it. Most of the people that I know that are falconers end up being biologists or working with birds. The appeal of it is just watching the birds fly.
Humans have been hunting with falcons for more than 4,000 years. We've long been fascinated by these masters of the sky. And joining me now to answer your questions about birds of prey are Bill Heinrich, the Interpretive Center Director for the World Center for Birds of Prey, and Greg Kaltenecker, Executive Director for Boise State University's Intermountain Bird Observatory. Thank you both for being here. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Joan. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, let's go to your questions.
Hi, my name's Piper, and I'm from Cynthia Mann Elementary. And my question is, what makes a bird of prey?
What makes a bird of prey? Well, in general, birds of prey have very keen vision. They have sharp talons, and they have a hooked bill.
Hi, my name is Ryan, and I go to Kamiah Elementary School in Kamiah, Idaho. My question is, how many birds of prey are there?
There are about 130 owl species and over 200 raptor species. About roughly just over 500 different birds of prey have been identified.
Zach asks, what is the most endangered bird of prey?
Well, there are actually several species of birds of prey that are endangered or in trouble. Bill and I were debating this question earlier, but I think maybe the Philippine eagle is one of the most endangered birds of prey, and there are several that are probably have fewer than 200 members left in their populations.
No, that's a good answer. And you know what? One of the rarest birds of prey was actually the Mauritius kestrel, and they were down to 2 breeding pairs, and now there are well over 200 breeding kestrels on the island of Mauritius. So, you know, it shows that a bird species can be really down and still be able to recover. Just like the California condor that was down to 22 individual species, and now there are over 400.
Hi, my name is Elliot, and I'm from Cynthia Mann Elementary School. And my question is, which bird of prey has the largest wingspan?
I would say the Andean condor would be the largest bird of prey and have the largest wingspan, probably, you know, right around 10 feet or just under.
Hi, my name is Dylan, and I go to school in Kamiah, Idaho. And my question is, how do eagles swoop down and get their fish?
Well, eagles are different from ospreys. Ospreys also swoop down and get fish, but eagles, when they swoop down and get fish, they usually don't dive all the way into the water. They go in as far as their legs so that their talons can be, you know, just under the surface of the water to grab the fish. So they don't dive all the way in, they just use their legs. The osprey, though, will dive all the way in the water, completely underwater to catch their fish sometimes.
Garrett asks, does an eagle have an eyelid to protect its eyes against the wind when it dives?
Well, they actually have 2 eyelids. They've got a lower and an upper eyelid, but when they're diving or flying in rapid flight, like a lot of birds of prey, falcons, as well have what's called a nictitating membrane. And that nictitating membrane comes across the eye sideways from front to back and protects the eye while the bird's in flight.
Hi, my name is Jaden, and I go to Cynthia Mann Elementary School. And my question is, do birds of prey have really good sense of smell?
You know, most birds of prey do not have a good sense of smell, and most birds in general don't have a very good sense of smell. And there are a few exceptions, though. The turkey vulture has been shown to have a very keen sense of smell. You can even cover a carcass up completely, and the turkey vultures will still find it.
Braden asks, how do eagles sneak up on their prey?
Well, most birds of prey will try to sneak up on their prey, and a lot of times eagles will simply just do it by flying so high the prey can't see them, or they'll follow the contours of the land and they'll fly right over the top of a hill, and there'll be an unsuspected rabbit or ground squirrel, and it'll give that eagle an advantage to see the prey before the prey sees it, and usually, you know, they can be pretty successful at that method.
Hi, my name is Deborah from Cynthia Mann Elementary, and my question is, why do turkey vultures have 2 hollow holes in the middle of their beaks?
You know, I had to do a lot of digging to try and find the answer to this question, and I think there's a couple. Maybe Bill can answer one and I can answer one, but I think that the beak of a turkey vulture is called perforate, and that means that they don't have a septum between or in the middle of each nostril, so you can see from one side to the other right through their nostrils. And I think one One good reason for having a bill like that is because they're a scavenger, or they eat carrion. They've got their head down near or in a carcass a lot of times when they're feeding, and that's one of the reasons why they don't have feathers on their head. But I think having a perforate nostril is much easier to clean after they're done feeding on a carcass as well. And there was another reason, Bill.
Well, since the turkey vultures have one of the most developed senses of smell of any bird, especially one of the few birds of prey that can actually smell, it has something to do with that as well. And oftentimes, turkey vultures will be the first on the prey to find it, and other birds of prey follow the turkey vultures. For example, California condors will look to turkey vultures to find carcasses that they in turn come and feed on as well, but the turkey vultures initially find the carcass.
Did you know some birds of prey have a third eyelid? They use this thin protective membrane to blink away debris and to enable themselves to see very clearly when they fly at fast speeds. Birds of prey aren't the only ones. Dogs and cats have a third eyelid too. Katie asks, what special qualities do vulture feathers have, and what effect does this have on the food chain?
Well, that's a tough question. I don't think vulture feathers have any special qualities, but it does allow me to tell you a little bit about vulture feathers in general. And vultures, for the most part, don't have feathers on their heads. And that's because they eat carrion, and they're usually sticking their heads down into and around, carcasses. And so, as a means of staying clean, they don't have feathers on their heads.
My name's Cooper, and I go to Cynthia Mann Elementary. And my question is, why do hawks fly low and eagles fly high?
Well, Cooper, actually both hawks and eagles can fly low, and they both can fly high. And most diurnal raptors, those are raptors that are active during the daytime, can use thermals, which are rising air currents, currents of warming air that rise up. And both hawks and eagles can use those to fly very, very high.
Hi, my name is Miriam. I'm from Cynthia Mann. My question is, do birds always fly in a pack?
Well, that's not necessarily true. In fact, birds of prey rarely fly in a pack, except you could say during migration a lot of birds will migrate together, and these are called kettles. So you'll see a large group of perhaps Swainson's hawks or broad-winged hawks or turkey vultures migrating, flying in a group. But mostly birds of prey are pretty solitary, except a few different species do like to hunt together.
Eric would like to know, what are birds' beaks made out of?
Birds' beaks are made out of a substance called keratin. It's the same thing that your fingernails are made out of.
Hello, my name is Jackson, and I go to Cynthia Mann Elementary School. And my question is, how sharp are a peregrine falcon's talons?
Well, they're about like a little hot needles is what I used to call them. If a peregrine had accidentally grabbed your hand while you were feeding it or something. So they're about as sharp as anything can be. And they're designed that way to hold on to prey. And a lot of falcons in particular will bind to their prey in the air, and they have to have sharp talons to be able to hang on to that prey. And sometimes the prey gets away, sometimes it doesn't. But they really depend on those sharp talons to capture things.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth from Cynthia Mann Elementary School, and my question is, how many types of owls are there?
Well, the research I did, it showed that there's between 220 and 225 species of owls in the world, but I think this is debated a little bit.
Hi, my name is Mariah from Cynthia Mann Elementary School, and my question is, what do owls eat?
Well, owls eat a little bit of everything. Some of the very small owls will eat insects, and some owls as large as the great horned owl, will eat animals up the size of a skunk or, even large rabbits. And just about everything in between an owl can eat. A lot of owls, like the barn owl, specialize in eating mice and voles out of barns and around buildings at night.
Hi, my name is Gabby from Cynthia Mann Elementary School, and my question is, why do owls live in tree holes and not nests?
Well, that's a good question. Not all owls live in holes, but the ones that do, they nest in cavities, and they're what we call cavity nesting birds, and that's just the kind of house they like to live in. They usually find a cavity that's been made by another bird, or maybe a mammal, something like a squirrel or a woodpecker, but there are many, many different kinds of cavity nesting birds. I mentioned woodpeckers, and other birds you might be familiar with, like bluebirds as well, nest in cavities. And some birds, believe it or not, nest in holes in the ground, like the burrowing owl.
Andrew would like to know, what is the fastest bird of prey in the world?
Well, you'd have to say the peregrine falcon, and they've been clocked at speeds of over 240 miles an hour in a dive.
Isaac would like to know, what are feathers made of?
Well, again, feathers are made of the same substance that bird beaks and bird talons are made of, and that's keratin. Same thing as our fingernails.
Emma asks, what are contour feathers?
Well, contour feathers are basically every feather that you can see on a bird. So they're all down feathers are a different type of feather that come under the contour feathers. But the contour feathers can range in size from the large primary feathers that enable birds to fly high and fast, and the long tail feathers that they have, to the smaller feathers around their heads. So basically a contour feather is any of those. And birds have anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 feathers on their bodies.
Birds of prey have special adaptations to help them be fierce hunters. And owls have a special type of neck, wings, and eyes to help them survive. Owls are predators. This means they eat other animals. Most owls hunt at night, so their bodies are adapted to help them pursue their prey in the dark. The most obvious adaptation is an owl's large eyes. They're huge, and they seem to fix right on you. Wow! But did you know that owls can't move their eyes from side to side like you do? Their eyes are always looking in the direction they're facing. Can you imagine how you would see the world if you couldn't glance to the side? You'd have to hop in a circle to see who or what was next to you. But owls don't hop in a circle. They have another adaptation that helps them to see each side and behind them. Owls have very flexible necks. This lets them turn their heads almost in a full circle. Wouldn't it be freaky if you were able to turn your head almost all the way around? Ew! Owls are also adapted to hear the smallest sounds of prey moving in the dark. See how the front of an owl's face is almost circular and slightly hollowed like a bowl. This shape is called a facial disc, and it gathers sound around the owl's head and into its ears. So an owl sitting in a tree can hear its food moving, even if it's a little mouse scurrying way down below. It's just like one of those awesome detective toys you can use to hear your buddy from far away.
What you got there?
Nothing.
What?
And it may just help you find food, too.
What?
Some candy.
I want some!
Another adaptation that makes an owl a great hunter is how quietly it flies. An owl's flight feathers have serrated edges like a comb. This means they aren't smooth like most birds. These special edges break up the wind flowing over the wings, letting an owl fly almost silently. Shh. Can you see how this would help it hunt? It's sort of like playing hide and seek. If you're trying to sneak up on a friend, you'd want to stay really quiet. Soft, serrated grass can muffle the sound of feet, just like the owl's serrated feathers muffle the wind.
Gotcha!
But what if you're running on hard concrete? It would be pretty difficult to surprise somebody then. If a prey animal can't hear the owl approaching, it won't run and hide. And then the owl gets to eat. But do you know what happens to an owl every time it eats? It throws up.
Ew! What does it throw up?
An owl pellet. When an owl eats, it eats the whole animal, including the bones and fur. Doesn't that sound yummy?
Oh, yuck!
Owls can't digest bones and fur, so they vomit up those animal parts in the form of an owl pellet. And if you carefully pull the pellet apart, you can find those tiny bones.
Oh, awesome. It's so tiny, it's a skull.
Whoa, awesome! I think I'll just eat this.
In the winter, owls will be courting, so that's the best time to listen for the calls of the great horned owl. Who knows what you might hear?
Hi, my name is Devin from Cynthia Mann Elementary, and my question is, what is the most dangerous bird of prey?
That's a great question. I guess it depends on what prey species you are. So, the most dangerous bird of prey to a mouse might be a kestrel or a small owl. And the most dangerous bird of prey for a jackrabbit might be a red-tailed hawk or a golden eagle. So it really varies. They're all adapted to kill different types of prey and hunt in different methods. So there's no particular bird of prey that's more dangerous than the other. They're just different sizes and shapes and take different prey species.
Kara asks, which is better at catching prey, a male or a female, and why?
I don't think either is better at catching prey, but there's an interesting thing about raptors that I want to mention here is that males and females in most diurnal raptors are different sizes, and the males are typically smaller than the females. We call this size dimorphism. And so the males typically take a different prey than the females do. Usually a smaller prey, and this is a great adaptation when you're a predator. It allows you to take many more types of prey than if you were both the same size. And so I think in general within a species the males might be a little bit more agile and faster, but the females are very good hunters as well.
Hi, my name is Dawson and I go to Cynthia Mann Elementary School. My question is, how do owls turn their heads around?
Well, owls have an extra vertebrae in their neck, several extra vertebrae that allow them to have the capability of turning their head almost completely around. Greg, you might want to add.
Yeah, so they have extra vertebrae. They can turn their head almost completely around, but not all the way. They can turn it only about 270 degrees, and this is a great adaptation for a hunter like an owl to be able to see prey all the way around them without actually having to move their body. So they can be silent and still.
Davis would like to know, why do vultures eat dead birds?
Well, vultures evolved a little bit different than hawks and falcons that actually have to kill their prey. Vultures usually find animals that are already dead and eat those, and they seem like the nature's cleanup crew. So they'll eat dead animals that help prevent disease from taking place in areas where there are large die-offs of a certain type of animal. The vultures come in and clean things up.
Hi, my name is Sawyer. I go to Cynthia Mann Elementary, and my question is, how do ospreys catch the slippery fish without the fish falling?
Well, they have, their toes are shaped, it's called zygodactyl, so the two front and two back toes can work together simultaneously to hold onto a fish. And they also have special scales designed to keep that fish from slipping in their feet, and again with needle-sharp talons. And the neat thing about ospreys, you'll notice if you'll see them flying with the fish, that they tend to carry it aerodynamically so that fish is always pointing straight ahead. So it's always interesting to note.
Dylan would like to know, how are birds endothermic?
Wow, that's a great question. So endothermic means that they're warm-blooded, so they can maintain their body temperature whether it's cold outside or warm outside. And one of the greatest adaptations birds have for being endothermic is that they have feathers. They use those feathers to either warm themselves up. Have you ever seen a bird on a cold, wintry day where its feathers are all puffed up? They can do that, or they can make their feathers very tight against their body, and that keeps them cooler on a hot day.
Hi, my name is Hannah from Cynthia Mann Elementary, and my question is, what is the largest bird of prey?
Well, the largest bird of prey would be the Andean condor, and probably followed up by the California condor. And both those birds weigh just over 20 pounds, the Andean condors do, and have a wingspan of right about 10 feet or just a little bit smaller.
Clay asks, what does an eagle eat?
Well, it depends on what kind of eagle you're talking about. There are many different species of eagles in the world. Many of them eat small mammals, things like ground squirrels or rabbits. Many of them also eat reptiles like snakes. Some eat fish, and some even eat prey like monkeys.
Hi, my name is Amy, and I go to Cynthia Mann Elementary School. And my question is, why do eagles have really good eyesight?
Well, all birds of prey have great eyesight. I'm not sure that eagles have any particular advantage over other birds of prey, but most birds of prey can see about a mile. And it's often said that they can see 8 times better than humans can. So they have tremendous eyesight, which allows them to see their prey for long distances and also helps them to sneak up on their prey and find the prey well before the prey sees them.
Helen would like to know, how do birds of prey lay their eggs?
Well, birds of prey lay their eggs just like any other bird does. Usually the eggs are formed in the oviduct, and over a period of 2 or 3 days, the calcium is deposited on the egg, and then the egg is laid. And for example, a peregrine falcon would lay an egg every other day until a clutch of 3 to 4 eggs is complete.
Eloise asks, do birds of prey eat people?
I'm happy to say that no, birds of prey do not eat people.
Bill, before we run out of time, I want to ask, why did you pick a job that deals with birds of prey?
Well, I've liked birds of prey ever since I could remember. And I became a falconer when I was 12 years old and started working with birds of prey, and that eventually evolved into a job working for the Peregrine Fund and managing our Peregrine Falcon Release Program for years and our California Condor program, and now working in our education program.
And Greg, if you want to work with birds of prey, what should you study in school?
Well, first of all, they should study biology in school. They should also take as many math courses as they can, and as many other science courses as they can through school.
I'm sorry, guys, we've run out of time. I so appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thanks a lot, and the kids all had wonderful questions.
And thank you to the folks here at the World Center for Birds of Prey for hosting us. You can learn lots more about birds of prey and lots of other scientific topics on the Science Trek website. And we'll answer more questions about birds of prey on Science Trek, the web show. And if you want to submit a question for Science Trek, it's easy, and you and your class can win prizes. You can send it as an email or as a video question, recorded on your webcam or cell phone. And if you're an educator, we'll even lend you a camera. Our last prize winner was Riley in Mrs. Hudson's class at Dalton Elementary. So to find out more about birds of prey, how to send in your questions, and how to win, go to the Science Trek website. And each week, check out my blog for the latest science news for kids. You'll find it all at idahoptv.org/science-trek. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Science Trek.
Presentation of Science Trek on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
If you want to learn more about this topic or watch our videos, check out the Science Trek website at idahoptv.org/science-trek.